Hello everybody, this is John. Welcome to the NCGA FMC Ag Weather Outlook for July 18th, 2015. We're getting right through into the middle part of the summer now, and it's been somewhat of an unusual summer, although, whenever I say that, it seems like every summer to some degree and in some area is unusual. Keep in mind that average temperatures, average precipitation is derived from many years, and any one of those years is most likely either a little bit too hot or too cold, too wet or too dry. So extremes do make up averages, and we've definitely seen a little bit of that this year as well in some areas, particularly the eastern corn belt. Now, my theme over the last couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks or so, has been that I expected a decrease in overall widespread nature and intensity of precipitation over the eastern corn belt. And if you're in an area that's got a lot of rain this week, you're saying, what's going on, John? That didn't really happen. Well, I think it did, just not for your area. And let me show you. Remember I said southern Illinois? Look at this. These are the number of rain days over the last 7 days. And there's a lag here of a day or so, but it gives you the message here. And generally speaking, look at this area in green. A couple weeks ago, it was much more widespread. We had dark green over the entire eastern corn belt. So we are seeing some improvement here in a decrease in the frequency and the intensity of these rain events. That said, there was still very heavy rain in some areas, and we can see that here, that the eastern corn belt has still been fairly busy. Very active in some areas. Now the yellow is 2 inches, the red is 5 inches, and we really don't want to see any of the amounts near 5 inches, and we do still see these pockets. So that's why I say it's still definitely an issue, it's definitely a problem. But on the other hand, I'm trying to find some positive light here, and we are seeing some areas that really didn't receive all that much precipitation that had been wet. Now here's an example of the past 7-day percent of normal, and you can actually see some of the eastern corn belt here. We had below normal precipitation, including the southern half of Illinois, which has been very wet, southwest corner of Indiana, but look how abrupt this is. Parts of southeast Indiana extremely wet last week, southwest Indiana very dry. So we're getting a variance. If we go further north, Iowa has also seen increased variability of precipitation, very dry in the northeast part, very wet in the south. And so that's sort of typical of summertime. And then if I look at the percent of normal for the last 7 days, areas in blue and green received a surplus of rainfall, and yellow a deficit. So if we go to the western corn belt here, we see some areas a bit above and some below. That's sort of been the long-term outlook for that region, near normal. Some areas are trending dry, some areas trending wet, not a whole lot trending wet. I think we have a little bit more trending dry. So generally what we want to see going forward is a decrease in precipitation or a continued decrease in the eastern corn belt, and it wouldn't hurt me at all to get an increase in precipitation over the western corn belt. Now, temperatures over the last 7 days have been hot over the western corn belt. We really have this west versus east going on this summer. And that can occur. That's not necessarily unusual, but it's very much more pronounced this season. Now look at the upper Midwest. Look at the temperatures, 6 to 8 degrees above normal. I mentioned that last week. Remember I showed you that 100-degree temperatures are well into the 90s over the middle part of the nation. Well, here we go. We had 6 to 8 degrees above normal, which is pretty unusual for the middle of summer. At the same time, look at Ohio. 4 to 6 degrees below normal, and that's due to the precipitation. So that's really been the pattern. Now, the areas that have been dry or trending dry, the western corn belt, upper Midwest, those hot temperatures certainly don't help. We get increased evapotranspiration. Evaporation helps dry out that upper soil, and that's why I just said that's where I'd like to see more rain. Now, if I go past the last 60 days, this might be of interest. You can see that some of the areas that have been extremely hot recently were actually a bit cooler when we look at a 60-day average. So we're looking at a cool summer over the eastern corn belt and Great Lakes, and we're looking at an increasingly hot summer over the west. But it started off, we look at this average here, it did start off cool. So cooler to hotter over the west, and definitely a cooler summer so far over the east. Now, over the last week, we also had our share of severe weather. I put out a post on this a bit. We have an active jet stream, and that brings in energy, and it also gives you a movement of cells. And look at this. These cells, look at the movement. Look how much area these have covered. This is indicating a cluster of severe storms in this area that have moved to the east and southeast. So from a rain perspective, when you have a jet stream energy over us, it moves these systems. It covers more of an area. So if we don't need rain, that's bad. If we need rain, that's good. But we did have severe weather on a number of days, red or tornado reports. Pretty unusual to get tornadoes this time of year. Not real unusual, but somewhat unusual. And that's saying we have more upper energy with that jet stream and more wind shear. And so you can see we had an active week as far as severe weather. So we find ourselves in a situation with soil moisture now, and this will be updated again this week, where we continue to have wet soils. This is July 4th, and I'm going to show you the change here to July 11th. Very little change over the upper Midwest, but it is trending a bit dry. And then we have got wetter in spots here. I think when we come out with the next one this week, we're going to probably see this area, a little bit more variability here. But generally, first part of July, we've had pockets that have gotten wet, but the general trend has been eastern Corn Belt has been wet. Okay, so let's take a look at the pattern. That high pressure centered over Texas, hot and dry over Texas and Oklahoma, has pushed up to the north. And I think the pattern we're going to see here is, see this little area in blue here? We're going to have a dip in the jet stream. Whenever I see any hint of this high pushing off to the west and any hint of a dip in the jet stream, that's probably going to bring a cold front down and bring us some relief here, at least temporarily. And that's what we're going to see this week. We're going to have this pattern of hot, not so hot, hot, not so hot. That's going to be sort of the pattern as we see that front push down. So by late this week, we actually have some cooler than normal weather over the Great Lakes and eastern Corn Belt, maybe even parts of the upper Midwest, but it's not going to last. It's going to get the warm up right on the heels of this. And then late this week, about 1 week from now, look at this, over the upper Midwest, it gets quite hot again. So okay, now let's jump ahead now until the latter part of July. This is out there July 21st through 26th. And what difference do I see in the jet stream? Well, the major difference is that area of high pressure over Texas looks like it's going to retreat further west. That's going to bring the hotter weather out a bit to the west. That means that the Great Lakes and the eastern Corn Belt, more than likely, if I would just look at this, I would say normal or even cooler than normal. And even the central Corn Belt, probably not so hot. So this is actually a bit milder temperatures. And if I look at July, this is actually, the date here is incorrect. This is actually early part of August, the first couple days of August, looking way out there for temperatures. Look at this, cooler. So I think that's the trend. The long range trend is that if we have hot weather right now, as we get into late July, early August, the models are indicating not so hot. And that's been the story so far this summer. Okay, now precipitation, that's really been of interest. Remember I said we want some more precipitation in the west, not so much in the east. Well, here's the next 7 days. We're not quite getting exactly what we want, but we're going, I think, in the right direction. We still have precipitation in an area we really don't want it, but it's more like an inch or so rather than 3, 4, or 5 inches. So I'm not sure if that's the best news you want to hear, but it's not the worst. Likewise, over the western section where we need more precip, maybe a ½ inch or so. Again, not enough, up to an inch in a few spots. Definitely not enough, but at least it's not totally dry. Further to the south, look at this under this high pressure. Another week of hot and dry, extremely hot and dry over Texas and most of Oklahoma. So, and extending, I know I have some listeners here in the, actually some corn growers in Alabama, and light precipitation in that region as well. Soil moisture changes. This is where I say that even though we do get some precipitation from a climatological standpoint, we should actually get some drying soils over a good part of the area that's been extremely wet through the end of the month of July. And actually, if we look at the entire growing region, with an exception of a very small area here, for the most part, we're going towards drier. So there will be some pockets of heavy rain, but will they offset the summertime evapotranspiration? It doesn't look like it. Looks like soils will be drying. So the eastern Corn Belt, that's good. Western Corn Belt, perhaps not so good. Okay, so real quickly, let's run through our precipitation anomalies. I know you like to see that. This is week one. Week two, the trend of settling down a bit over the eastern Corn Belt. Let's hope we get some above normal precipitation over the upper Midwest there. Here's week three, and here's week four. Overall, maybe not the best news for the next 4 weeks, but definitely this is better news, and it's not a worst case scenario. It's actually not the best, but it's pretty good overall. So here are your takeaway points from this week's briefing. Temperatures, sort of this variance, hot, mild, hot, but then as we get late in July into early August, if that dip in the jet stream does occur, it looks like it could be milder temperatures. Rainfall, I think I covered that pretty good. Pretty good scenario overall, but in some localized areas, still some problems. So overall, I think we're getting into a more summertime pattern than we've seen for a while with more scatter type precipitation. That's this week's briefing. Like I say all the time, if I'm not covering what you want, you let me know. There's my email. If you like what I'm covering, if it's really helping you, I'd like to hear it as well. There's my email. So have a great week. We'll talk to you again next weekend.